It was a Thursday night when Carlos Silva parked his 2015 Honda Civic in front of the Copacabana Palace Hotel in Rio de Janeiro. The car had a few scratches on the right side, and the driver's seat was worn from constant use. Carlos glanced in the rearview mirror and adjusted the navy blue polo shirt he'd been wearing for 3 days straight. It was the only clean one he had at the moment. At 54, Carlos had been driving for ride-sharing apps for almost 6 years. He started after being laid off from a metalworking factory where he'd worked for 15 years. His divorce had consumed a good chunk of his savings, and driving became his way to start fresh. He knew every street in Rio like the back of his hand and prided himself on maintaining a 4.9-star rating on the app. That night, Carlos had received an unusual request. The passenger had asked him to enter an event to deliver an important envelope. "Just hand it to the organizer," the elegant man who got into his car in Leblon had said. "Here's the invitation and 200 reis for your trouble."
The envelope can't leave your end.
Carlos had never stepped foot in a place like this.
The hotel lobby gleamed with crystal chandelier, and the marble floor reflected golden lights.
Security guards in black suits checked a guest list at the entrance to the main ballroom. Carlos approached, holding the sealed envelope tightly. "Good evening, I need to deliver this to the event organizer," Carlos told the security guard, a tall man with broad shoulders. The guard looked Carlos up and down, noticing his simple clothes and worn sneakers. "Do you have an invitation?" Carlos showed him the paper he'd received. The guard eyed it suspiciously, compared it to a list, and reluctantly allowed him in. "Be quick," he mumbled. The ballroom was stunning. Over 200 people mingled among tables decorated with white orchids and crystal glasses. Men in tuxedos chatted animatedly with women in haute couture dresses. The sound of a chamber orchestra filled the air, mixed with laughter and low conversations. Carlos walked along the edges of the room, trying to locate someone who looked like the organizer. He felt completely out of place. Each step seemed to echo, though the carpet was thick and silent. People looked at him with curiosity, and some with obvious disapproval. Near the bar, a group of young executives noticed his presence. They were 3 men in their 30s, all with expensive watches and smug smiles. "Look, guys," said the tallest one, with premature gray hair. "I think the Uber driver got lost." The others laughed. "Seriously, man," another, wearing designer glasses, continued. "Employee entrance is through the kitchen. You must be looking for someone from the staff, right?" "Maybe he came to collect an overdue fare," the third teased, making the others roar with laughter. Carlos felt his face flush. "I just need to deliver a document," he said quietly, trying to move away. "Document?" The one with glasses scoffed. What kind of document would a rideshare driver deliver at a party like this?
"A traffic ticket." The laughter grew louder.
Some people nearby started paying attention to the situation. Carlos clutched the envelope to his chest and continued searching, pretending not to hear the comments multiplying around him. "Someone should call security," a woman in a red dress murmured to her companion. "He clearly shouldn't be here. He's probably some kind of con artist," the other replied. "These drivers sometimes try to pass as guests to steal something." Carlos found refuge near a marble column, observing the crowd. He was starting to regret taking on this task. The envelope felt heavy in his hands, as if made of lead. Across the room, he finally spotted a man in his 40s, elegantly dressed, chatting with a small group near the stage. From his attire and the attention he received, he seemed important. Carlos took a deep breath and headed over. "Excuse me," Carlos said, gently interrupting the conversation. "Would you be Eduardo Mendez, the organizer?" The man turned around. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "I have an envelope to deliver to you," Carlos said, extending the document. Eduardo took the envelope with curiosity, but before he could open it, the group of executives who had mocked Carlos approached. "Eduardo, man, do you know this driver?" the tallest one asked. "He's been wandering around the room for a while. We thought it was a bit strange." "Driver?" Eduardo looked at Carlos with renewed interest. "Yeah, he admitted it himself," the one with glasses continued. "Said he came to deliver a document. Probably some legal notice or something." Carlos felt all eyes on him. The circle of people around him grew. Murmurs began to spread through the room. Eduardo carefully opened the envelope. Inside were a letterhead sheet and a card. He read in silence, his eyebrows progressively rising. He looked at Carlos, then at the paper again, then at Carlos a second time. "Mr. Carlos Silva?" Eduardo asked, his voice completely changing tone. "Yes, sir. Would you mind accompanying me to the stage, please?" Carlos's confusion was evident. "Is there a problem with the document?" "On the contrary," Eduardo said with a smile that mixed surprise and reverence. "There's something I need to announce to everyone present." The group of executives exchanged confused glances. "Eduardo, what's going on?" the gray-haired one asked. "You'll find out in a moment," Eduardo replied, walking towards the stage with Carlos beside him. The orchestra stopped playing. Eduardo stepped onto the stage and adjusted the microphone. The entire room turned to them, a murmur of curiosity filling the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening," Eduardo began, his voice echoing through the loudspeakers. "As you know, we are here celebrating the launch of our new sustainable investment platform, Eco Capital." Polite applause echoed through the room. "What many of you don't know is the story behind this project," Eduardo continued. 2 years ago, our company was on the verge of bankruptcy. We had a brilliant idea, but no capital to develop it. That's when an angel investor decided to bet on us. Carlos remained beside the stage, still confused about what was happening. This investor not only provided the initial capital of 5 million reais, Eduardo continued, but also became our most valuable strategic advisor. His suggestions on sustainability and social responsibility were fundamental to the platform's development. The room was completely silent now. The interesting thing is that this investor always asked to remain anonymous. We only communicated by email and phone. Until today, I had never personally met the man who saved our company and made this event possible. Eduardo paused dramatically, looking at Carlos. "The envelope I just received contains the identity of our angel investor and a message asking me to make the official introduction." The murmurs in the room intensified. All attention turned to Carlos, who was beginning to understand the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eduardo said, his voice filled with emotion, "it is with immense pleasure and honor that I introduce to you Mr. Carlos Silva, founder and CEO of Silva Holdings, our angel investor, and the man who made all of this possible." The silence in the room was deafening for a few seconds. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, explosions of whispers and exclamations filled the air.
Carlos walked onto the stage slowly, still processing the moment.
Eduardo reverently handed him the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," Carlos began, his calm voice contrasting with the commotion in the room. "I know many of you are surprised, and I completely understand." He paused, observing the shocked faces in the audience. The 3 executives who had mocked him were pale, their mouths agape in disbelief. "My name truly is Carlos Silva, and I really do drive for ride-sharing apps," he continued. "But this is not my only activity." Carlos told his story. 20 years ago, he had invented a small component for engines that significantly improved energy efficiency. He patented the invention and licensed it to several car manufacturers. The royalties, wisely invested in the stock market and tech startups, had generated a considerable fortune. When I got divorced and lost my job at the metalworking factory, I could have simply lived off my income, Carlos explained. But I found that driving kept me connected to real people, to everyday problems, to the life happening on the streets. He looked directly at the group of executives who had mocked him. "Driving taught me that the best investment opportunities aren't in glass offices or PowerPoint presentations. They're in conversations with passengers who have brilliant ideas but no access to capital. They're in the real problems people face every day." Carlos explained that he had met Eduardo during a ride. The young entrepreneur, disheartened after an unsuccessful meeting with investors, had shared his frustration during the trip. The idea of Eco Capital had impressed Carlos, who decided to investigate further. "I invested in Eco Capital not just for the financial potential, but because I believe sustainable businesses are the future," Carlos said. "And Eduardo and his team proved me right." The room was completely silent now, every word absorbed by the mesmerized audience. "I apologize for remaining anonymous until today," Carlos continued. But I wanted to ensure our partnership was based on the project's quality, not my identity or wealth. Carlos paused, his eyes again meeting the group of executives. I learned that a person's true worth isn't in the clothes they wear or the car they drive. It's in their ability to contribute, to create value, to make a difference in others' lives. He smiled gently. Some of you might have been surprised to see a rideshare driver at this event. I hope tonight helps you rethink your concepts of success and how we judge people. Carlos handed the microphone back to Eduardo and stepped off the stage. The room erupted in applause. People approached him, offering apologies, business cards, opportunities to chat. The three executives who had mocked him approached hesitantly. The tallest one, with gray hair, was visibly embarrassed. "Mr. Silva," he stammered, we would like to apologize for our behavior. It was completely inappropriate." Carlos looked at them calmly. "Don't worry. We all make hasty judgments sometimes. The important thing is to learn from those moments." Could you give us a second chance?" The one with glasses asked. "Perhaps we could discuss business opportunities?" Carlos smiled. "Of course. Do you have my card?" He pulled a simple, minimalist business card from his jeans pocket. "Carlos Silva, Silva Holdings, Investments and Participations." "Call my office next week," Carlos said. "But remember, I'm interested in projects that make a real difference in society, not just profits." For the rest of the night, Carlos moved through the room with ease. He spoke with entrepreneurs, politicians, artists, and investors. His simplicity and deep knowledge impressed everyone. Several people commented on how his unique perspective, gained on the streets as a driver, offered valuable insights into markets and consumer behavior. At midnight, Carlos bid farewell to Eduardo and the Eco Capital team. He walked to the parking lot where his Honda Civic awaited him. Before getting into the car, he took one last look at the illuminated hotel. His phone rang. It was a ride request. A nurse finishing her shift at Sousa Aguiar Hospital needed to go home to Campo Grande. Carlos smiled and accepted the ride.
He drove through the empty streets of Rio, reflecting on the night.
The nurse, tired after 12 hours of work, began talking about the challenges of the public healthcare system. She mentioned an idea she had for an app that would connect unemployed healthcare professionals with private clinics. "That's an interesting idea," Carlos said, looking in the rearview mirror. "Have you ever thought about developing it?" "Oh, it's just a dream," the nurse replied. "I don't have the capital or the tech knowledge." "You never know," Carlos said softly. "Sometimes the best opportunities appear when we least expect them." He handed his card to the nurse at the end of the ride. "If you want to talk more about your idea, give me a call. Investing in healthcare innovations is one of my passions." The nurse looked at the card, confused, but promised to get in touch. Carlos drove home, to a simple 2-bedroom apartment in Copacabana. He parked his car in the building's garage and went up to the 10th floor. From his small apartment, he had a partial view of the beach. He sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee and opened his laptop. He had dozens of emails from people he'd met at the party, business proposals, invitations to events. But what caught his attention most was a message from Eduardo, sent just a few minutes ago. "Carlos, thank you for an unforgettable night. Your revelation not only changed everyone's perception but also made me reflect on my own prejudices." Eco Capital's investments grew 300% in just the last 3 hours after people researched Silva Holdings. You not only saved our company, but you taught us a valuable lesson about humility and judgment. I hope we can continue our partnership for many years. P.S. 3 of the investors present have already contacted me, interested in learning about other projects in your portfolio. Carlos smiled and closed his laptop. He looked at his driver's uniform hanging on the chair. Tomorrow would be another day, other rides, other conversations, other opportunities to discover hidden talents on the city streets. Before going to sleep, Carlos reflected on how that night had changed many people's perspectives on success, appearance, and human worth. He knew he would continue driving, not because he needed the money, but because he had discovered that the streets were the best business school in the world. The next day, the story spread across social media. Uber driver reveals he's a millionaire at luxury party in Rio, went viral, generating millions of views and comments. The video of the presentation, recorded by some guests, became a sensation, inspiring discussions about prejudice, judgment, and the deceptive appearances of success. Carlos continued driving, continued investing in innovative projects, and continued proving that true wealth lies in the ability to transform lives and create opportunities, regardless of the clothes you wear or the car you drive.